Adams. Welcome to the October version of Quick Start, which is a three-part session that's intended to give you an introduction to Balancing Act and a focus on creating your own simulation. We're delighted to have you. We've got a terrific group of folks, everyone from Phoenix to Baltimore and Kansas City, Sterling Heights, and a lot of places in between. So I'm going to go ahead and begin to share my screen with you. Let's see if I can do that. And we'll go ahead and begin. If you have any questions, there is a feature, I think you can raise your hand or something like that. You can also put something in chat and I will be glad to respond. But I think the best thing to do would be for you just to, if you can find it, by your name, there's like a hand that you can raise. And if you have any questions, please go ahead and join us, or go ahead and ask, and I will do my very best to answer. Okay, so let's go ahead and begin. Once again, my name is Chris Adams, and I'm one of the co-founders of Balancing Act, and we're delighted that you could join us. Budget engagement is something that I think is tremendously important, and it's something that's becoming more and more a thing as we go on, and as transparency becomes more of a norm in North America. The next step, I think, really is participation. So the plan for today, we'll talk a little bit about Balancing Act. We actually just did a new software release yesterday, so I'm going to show you some of the latest and greatest things. Before we do that, we're going to talk just a little bit about budget engagement, kind of what it is and where it's going. Talk a little bit about public participation using the IAPA Spectrum, and then we'll have a little bit of a how-to get started with Balancing Act. So many of you have probably heard of the IAPA Spectrum. It's the International Association of Public Participation, and it's been around for several years, and it's just a nice way of helping you think about what your goals might be for why you would use Balancing Act. And so it's not meant to be an evaluative spectrum. It's just meant to sort of help you situate with where you are. It does go from right to left, but it's not the right side is not necessarily better than the left side. So the first part is that people, public entities might wish to inform their public, which is more of a one-way type of communication where you're just sort of sharing information. PDFs, honestly, can do a decent job of that if you're just trying to share information. The next step is if you want to have a little bit more feedback, and that's in IAPA Spectrum language, that's considered to consult. The next one is involve, and I'll just say this is where most of our folks tend to be, is that they want to actually get some direct input from the public, that they want to sort of understand what concerns and issues are, and to get some good feedback. And then the next two steps are collaborate and empower. And at least in budget engagement, there aren't too many people that do that. There is sort of a strain in budget engagement called participatory budgeting. It's a specific thing, and that is a little bit different than what we do, although it is a little bit related. But that usually involves almost like a block grant program that's run by a city council member or an elected official. And we've got some involvement with that, but that's not really going to be what we focus on today. The next thing I want to talk about is we always get asked when is the right time to do budget engagement, or when is the right time to use a budget simulation. And what we found is that our clients use it year-round, and they just use it differently at different periods. It can be used as a form of transparency. I tend to think that it's a fairly useful form of transparency because it's not just a PDF and it's not just a visualization, but it's a way to let people sort of interact with a model. And Balancing Act is something that you can change and edit very quickly. So you can have different versions of it with different types of interaction at different times. It's a way for you to sort of passively or not so passively just get impact all year round. And it's a really nice replacement for a budget and brief. Budget and briefs I don't think get used too much. So this is actually a really nice way to do that. The two most common times to use Balancing Act, if you look at the teal box and the yellow box, is maybe 3 or 4 months into your fiscal year. when you're really kind of wrestling with some trade-offs, you're beginning to get some revenue projections in, and you really want to sort of test things out. If you're looking at a potential deficit, you may want to be framing up some potential service level constraints. City of San Jose not too long ago had a budget deficit, and so they were trying to see where there might be some acceptance given the situation for residents to, for example, have libraries closed for an extra day a week and have some cost savings from that. But also just to share other types of trade-offs as well. And it could be that you're testing interest in some type of a revenue measure, that type of thing. And so so in the early part of the year, it's a good way to kind of understand trade-offs. The next most common time to use Balancing Act at Yellow Time is during the proposed budget. And next week, we're doing a webinar with the city of Norfolk. And they actually did a really nice job of using it in all three of these ways. And they used it during budget formulation to get voter preferences, resident preferences on trade-offs. But then they created a new simulation that had less opportunity for interaction, but still had really good educational and communicative ability that accompanied their city manager's budget. And they had a really good response with that. It provides a rationale for recommendations. It still allows you to collect input because usually your elected officials are still considering possible changes to the budget, but it's just a really nice way of providing additional information and context, and also feedback opportunity at that early stage. And then obviously the goal is to get a budget that reflects priorities and is well understood and that makes the most of public resources. All right, so getting started with Balancing Act, it's harder than it might seem actually to decide what to include, and so we're going to spend a fair amount of time on that. We're going to talk about entering data and context, and then we'll get you set up to do your trial. But before we go any further, I'm going to show you the demo I just made. It's called Anytown USA. Anytown demo, and I just want to show you some basic features. I know that some of you have a little bit of familiarity with Balancing Act, but I want to take about 5 or so minutes just to kind of show you around. So your local government branding goes up here, and this links to wherever you want it to go. The most prominent feature, at least going horizontal or vertically, is what we call the balance bar. And this is dynamic based on choices that are made below. And one of the things that makes simulations work is that they convey constraints. So it's not just providing information, it's not just saying that you can't do it, it's actually showing people why there might be an issue or a concern that warrants some further learning, or analysis, or decision making. And so this top one is designed to convey the most basic constraint of all, which is that you can't spend more money than you have. And so that this bar changes color and moves based on choices that you make below. The next thing going down is a donut chart that depicts spending, and the spending categories are over here on the right, and I'm going to come back to that in just a moment. And then down here is revenue, and I'm going to come back to that as well in just a sec. So if we open one of these up, let's open up the police department. We spent a lot of time. So Balancing Act, the platform that we have now was first released in 2015, but we've been doing online budget simulations since 2007, and we've learned a lot. And there's concerns and needs and challenges both on the resident citizen side as well as on the sponsor of the budget. And we try to create different tools and different approaches that remain simple, but also allow the level of complexity and sophistication that you need. And so I'm going to show you 3 variations on how you can present information and get feedback on it. And so the first one, this is an approach that was kind of developed an approach by Fort Lauderdale, where you have your whole budget up here, and then you pull out sort of a big chunk of it, the chunk that's kind of carryover, just sort of day-to-day operations. And you let people interact with that in a very simple way. And then you've got almost like some decision items or some real trade-offs that you would put down here. And then in this case, it's got some detention, which is sort of a required item, but that has some special constraints. I'm going to go over each one of these. But before I do that, I want to go all the way up to the top and just look at the top level, our category level, and show you how some of the tools for helping residents to understand that. So in this case, police department, the top line is that it's responsible for enforcing laws and public safety. If you click on more details, it gives you a little background. It says over the last 5 years, the overall police department budget has increased by 0.7% annually. Response times are in acceptable norms. And then down below that, this is a feature that is relatively new. You can now embed live updating graphics and widgets and videos and all sorts of things like that. And so in this case, this is from Largo, Florida. And you can scroll down and you can see what their budget to actual is for the current year. It's actually a really neat thing. And if you want more information on it, you can open it up and it takes you to their open book site. Open book is a transparency visualization, budget, financial visualization platform that's produced by a company called Questica. And then you can get more information and you can go to their financial visualization page and get all sorts of stuff like that. And one of the things, the ways that GFOA and others are going to be encouraging local governments to go is to take their transparency and add participation to it. So to take all of the great visualizations and information data sets that are being made available to the public and then put it into context somehow. And so this open book visualization does some of that. But as you can see, when you actually look at it in the context of trying to convey to residents and trying to share trade-offs, it's actually an even more useful display of data. Okay, so that's the top line for police. Now there's an opportunity here. This is the simplest type of interaction that we have for a budget item. So police operations, and it just basically says day-to-day police operations. The simple way to do it is that if you hit the plus sign, it by default takes 1% of this number, does the arithmetic, and then shows you what the impact or what the total is for that subcategory, and then it's just put you into deficit by 1%. And so you can go up, you can go down on this. You can actually change the increment if you want. You can have it, you can toggle between a fixed dollar amount and a percent. There's all sorts of stuff that you can do with that. So that's the simplest. And honestly, we wanted to create this and make it simple because most items in a local government's budget really are carryover, and they don't really require sort of a full presentation of what all the choice points are. And so this approach sort of leaves the bulk of the budget up in one category, and then down here where there might be a little bit more particular interest, you can draw people's attention. This next type of question is called a scenario question, and it's like a multiple choice type of question, but it gives you an opportunity to ask more questions or to provide more context so that people will understand what the trade-off is. And so the subcategory is role of civilians, and if you click on this, it says some research suggests that lower cost non-sworn officers could perform some services currently done by sworn officers, saving money that could be used in other parts of the budget. So, well, that sounds interesting. I'd like a little more information on that. And then this is completely configurable. You can put in whatever you want here. In this case, it links to a study from Michigan State University that talks about using civilians along with sworn officers in police workforce. And so so then it asks this question: should civilians be used to take most police reports instead of sworn officers? If you think that's a good idea, you can try out what that might look like. So use civilians where appropriate. That actually yields, in this instance, this is just my sandbox simulation, it yields a $90,000 surplus that actually paid for some of the new expenditures that we had above. So scenario questions are terrific. They take a little bit longer to create because you are often putting in additional types of context and an explanation. But when you have a trade-off, this is actually a really terrific way to go. Sort of a hybrid between the two is what we call fine-tuning our plus-minus questions. So this one on detention is basically about jails, and a little bit of hybrid here. So we don't want to let people just completely plus it up or minus it down. We wanted to provide a little bit of structure to it. So if a user starts to hit the minus sign on this one, when they get to a certain point, there's a warning that comes up, and once again, this is completely configurable when the warning goes off and what it says. It just says reducing the expenditure below $200,000 would mean that prisoners would need to be released against state law, and basically just the rationale for why it can't go below that. And so we've got to a point now where there's really, I think, some good options that sort of balance effort to produce, time and attention that a resident is willing to give to learning about budget trade-off, and also minding the constraints that you have as a public entity. Okay, so that's spending. Let me now go over here to the revenue side, and I've got three types of interaction here too. So it might be the case that you, like on sales tax, want to adjust by rate, and so if that's the case, once again, people get a chance to learn about what the revenue item is. They could put in a comment. They could say, "This is my least favorite tax," if you want, or something like that, and then they can save it, and it'll write to a file. But they may want to decrease that, and so you can adjust it by rate if you wish. So you can decrease it, and in this case, it goes down by 1/4 point each. But then another example of putting in a constraint is that you, in many states, you have to have voter approval, or there's some condition upon increasing a sales tax rate or a sales tax sum. And so in this case, if you hit the plus, it says increasing sales tax required vote of the people. I live in Colorado, and this is actually applicable in state law here, and in California it is, and some other places as well. We do let you go ahead and make the change because we think that's good information for you as public officials to know that that your voters, or at least some voters, may be interested in making a change, but they need to know that it's not as simple as just a city council or a county commissioner deciding to do it. This next one on property tax, this actually just goes up and down in the same way that that the previous ones I showed you did. And this is the new one. This one we're sort of excited about. This has been long time in development. We call this our dedicated funds type of question, and it allows you to do a number of things. It can show a relationship between. It shows a relationship between a revenue item and a spending item, and you can use it to sort of test willingness to pay for a tax increase. You can show that certain funds, such as federal funds or funds that are raised for a special purpose, like fire protection, cannot be used for other items. And I think it's going to be a really popular feature moving forward. So let me show you how it works. So you get, in this case, it's a Better Roads sales tax. You click on this and you find out that it's under consideration by council, and so council wants some input on who would like to have that. And then the question is, should sales tax be increased in order to fund transportation projects? And you can say yes, and that's what's in by default, or you can say no. And so let's go ahead and just click no. A modal opens, and it says the answer to this question about sales tax being increased. It says no, it says keep the status quo. And so it says city sales tax would remain at 2%. And then the spending impact is that streets and transportation would get $0 new. And you click on this and get more details. And I just went ahead and put in a pothole that wasn't fixed. And you can say, well, what if we decided that we did want to increase funding just a little bit by going for the Better Roads tax? If you say yes to it, it says this would increase the city's sales tax rate to 2.3%, and it would have a spending impact of $200,000 of new money. And then this is, once again, completely configurable. You can put in videos, you can put in text, you can put in links, etc., to convey to residents what this would actually purchase. And so we just said yes to that, and then it takes you up here and it shows you the spending that dedicated source just created. So that's we think that's going to be a very useful tool. We're going to be using it for the state of Colorado. It's got 3 ballot measures that voters will be voting on in November, 2 on transportation and 1 on education. We'll be launching it with the University of Colorado on Friday. So the next tool I want to show you is called Taxpayer Receipt, and this is just a quickie. This was created at the suggestion of the CFO of the city of Denver. She used to love to go around and to community groups, to town hall meetings, business groups, etc., and ask, how much do you think the city of Denver spends on snow removal each year? And people would guess things like 150 per person, how much per person? And people would say things like $150, $200, and they'd all get wildly wrong. And then she'd love to say, $12.50. How's that for a deal? And so she then asked us if we could think through how we might be able to create a taxpayer receipt. So that's what we have here, and it's actually on the back end. It's very closely related to the spending items that you have on your simulation. And so once you have a simulation, or once you have a taxpayer receipt, you can go either way. You're very close to having the material you need for both. So what we do is we estimate taxes that are paid to the local government. We have various ways of doing this. In this case, for Denver, it's sales tax and property tax. And so it asks what's your annual income. So I'm going to put in $50,000. And then I'm going to ask, and then it asks your age, and I'll just put in 40. And so what it does here is it takes the consumer expenditure survey that is put out by the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, and it says that somebody with $50,000 of income has X amount of disposable income that can be used towards goods and services. And then it says, and a 40-year-old buys a certain market basket of goods and services, some of which are sales taxable, some of which are not. And so it then creates an estimate of how much, and then it multiplies it by the sales tax rate that is associated with the local government entity, and it comes up with an estimate of how much tax somebody pays. And then, because sales tax is only payable and usable by the city where it is collected, it asks what percentage of your shopping do you actually do in Denver. And so let's just say 80%. And then down here, it asks if you own a home, and if you say yes, it asks what the actual value is. And if you click on this, you go to the Denver Assessor's website, and you can look it up. We can also use market value, actual value, assessed value, whatever it is that you want. I'm just going to throw in $300,000 here, and then view tax receipt. And so in this instance, it's showing that not a typical person is paying $16 for affordable housing. Scrolling down, finance governing mayor's office paying a whopping 87 cents. And then you can go here and you can click and find out more about that, find out what the mayor's office does. So functionally what that 87 cents is going towards. You can look at things like parks and recreation, $12.50, 27 rec centers, 29 pools, 10 programs, pretty good deal. And as you scroll all the way down, you can see the total estimate of how much tax that person has paid, and then you click on the info icon and you get a breakdown. So that's two examples, one fictitious and one real, of what we're trying to help create by using this budget participation mechanism. So now let's move forward and see about how we actually do it. Okay, so the first thing that you're going to have to decide is what to include, and I would guess that all of you know too much. There is we typically get somewhere between about 8 and 14 minutes of a resident's time, which we think is terrific. It's actually a pretty significant amount of residents' time to give you feedback. But you're not going to be able to give them everything. And so we really advise people to be very judicious about what they include, and to lump as many categories together, and to bring into the forefront those items that you really want input on. So like on that example I gave you on the live simulation of police, those things that are kind of carryover that you don't really need a whole lot of input on, or even additional explanation and understanding on, lump those together and describe it, and then pull out the items that really you are wrestling with and you want to have residents input on. So there's a taxonomy of 5 different types of information, basically, that are a balancing act. And so we've got the category, in this case public safety, subcategory police, subcategory amount, in this case 254 million. And then if you hit this blue info icon, we've got about 250 characters worth of text. And then if you have more details, that's where the videos come up, or links, or additional information. So that's kind of the general taxonomy. And let's now talk a little bit now about what makes a good category. And so my encouragement is to have it be something understandable to the public, and to don't feel like you need to match your budget book. City of Virginia Beach, they're a city that does budgeting for outcomes-based budgeting, and they don't have a line item for the police department and fire department. They actually have something called Make Virginia Beach the Safest City in the State. and then they have fire department, police department, EMS, and a few other things underneath that. So what I think is most important is to make it understandable to the public, and to have it be descriptive and meaningful. You know, I would say most often the department is what people use, which is okay. There's nothing really wrong with that. But don't be afraid to group them in different ways, and even to combine things, and really use as few as you need. Subcategories are really important. That's kind of where the rubber hits the road. It's a point of interaction. You might want to think about it even as the question that you're trying to ask. So if you're asking under the police department, if you're asking about 911 services, so if you have a category for 911, that's what they're going to be interacting with. And so to think really carefully about that, so that you can use this opportunity to sort of present an item underneath the category in a strategic way. And once again, try to make it relatable so that people can understand what they are. On the revenue side, really encourage you to roll up smaller items. City of Kansas City, I met with their budget director. They've been working with us for a year or two, and they very seamlessly integrated, I think about 36 different funds into their simulation, and yet to the resident, they didn't have all that complexity. They found a way to roll things up so that it was actually really easy to understand and to relate to. And so I'd really encourage people to do that. And there is an opportunity to lock a category. We don't encourage it too much because people tend to get frustrated, but there's a number of instances where categories can and should be locked. It might be that it's a federal transfer and you really don't have too much control of it. Sometimes there's a concern that by using a simulation, you might look to your residents as though you're fishing for a tax increase, and so we've had some entities that have locked down their revenue for that reason. But you know, for the most part, we find that people act pretty responsibly when they're given the simulation, and so we encourage people, most of our clients, to try to make as many things interactive as possible. Let's tour the control panel. So I'm going to go ahead and go to a live simulation on this, and let's see. Let me just go ahead and create a simulation. So I'm going to call this Quick Start Demo, and there's a number of different ways that you can do this. Just give it a quick, unique name, and by the time we end here, I'm going to show you where to create a trial account. I really hope that all of you will create a trial account, and then maybe we can even workshop them in weeks 2 or 3. So give it a name, choose your language. English, French, Spanish, Vietnamese are the ones that we have. We're adding Marshallese Islands. That was a request to Dubuque, Iowa. And then you can either duplicate from a previous year simulation if you're an ongoing customer, or if you're sort of iterating mid-year. But I'm going to go ahead and show you how to start from scratch. And so you start from scratch, you say continue, and then it creates this new document, or a new simulation control area. And the easiest way to do things is to import from a CSV. And so let me quickly show you how to do that. The CSV file, the format is very simple. This is an example of what it looks like on the expense side. Let's see, is it opening? There it is. Sorry, I should have opened this before. And it's just got that same structure that I was talking about, those 5 possible types of information. It's got category, subcategory, amount, more info, and more details. And these 2 are optional. These 3 are required. So now let me go ahead and pull these in. So I'm going to pull in the revenue import. Oh, sorry. I know what I did. Just a sec. Okay. Let me go here and pull that in. I guess. So here is revenue import, and it's pulling it in. And now we'll go to spending, and we'll pull that in. And so this is the one we just looked at. And then this is just an additional layer of categorization. It's optional. You don't have to use it if you don't want to. And now we can actually preview the simulation that we just made. And it's got police, and it's got patrol and detention, etc. And so once you get it this far, it's super easy to make changes. You can call this patrol cars if you want. You can change the amount from 900,000 to 950,000. You can change the context and description simply by erasing what you don't want and typing in new stuff. You can add videos, links, etc. It's really very easy and intuitive. And I'm not going to go. And then if you feel, once you get your own simulation, if you feel like looking at the additional options for customizations, feel free to you just click on the three dots over here, and you can make your scenario questions, or you can lock your items, or you can put in one of those alerts that tells you you can't do that without a vote of the people, etc. You can change between fixed dollar amount and rate, etc. You can set the boundaries, the floors and ceilings. There's all sorts of things. It's actually quite intuitive, and I'll go over this in future editions. But if you feel like playing with it, go right ahead. All right, so let me go back to the PowerPoint. So we've just kind of toured the back end a little bit, and I've already given you an example of getting information in. You can import it, you can add manually, or you can use an easy button. And we've got some budget software makers that especially cater to the government market. They're going to create an easy button. The one that is going to be first to do that is going to be Questica, and they're going to create an Export to Balancing Act feature from their software. They already have one that is a way to create a view. So if you use Questica Budget, you can actually tag the items that you want to go into Balancing Act and sort of store them there, and it'll actually export right to that really nice file that I was just talking about. Let me also show you. I should have showed you this before. If you want to add a category or a subcategory, say you want to add a subcategory under police. You just hit the plus sign and then you type in whatever it is, investigations, and you add an amount, and then it'll now be part of your simulation. I just wanted to show you that quickly. And then we've already talked about this, but just to reiterate, if you're going to be importing with a file, you just need to have the category, subcategory, and amount, and more info and more details are optional. And I just showed you that as well. You can add categories. It's really very intuitive. You just hover, and in some cases you'll see a plus sign or a trash can or something like that. It's meant to be very simple and easy. We've already talked a little bit about the context. More info is what shows up when you hit the blue info icon. I won't spend too much more time on that. This is just some suggestions for what you might want to include when you do more info. Try to be clear and brief. This is, essentially, this is how you let people know that something is important. This is more details. We've just added a rich text editor to more details, so you can put really whatever you want in there, including videos and live updating widgets. Let's see, I think I've already touched upon most of this stuff. Questions and discussion. If you have a question, let me know and I can unmute you, or you can ask it by raising your hand, or use the chat. There's all sorts of ways to use it. I'm not seeing anything. I hope that doesn't mean lack of interest. Oh, there it is. Jaron, I'm going to go ahead and, oh, okay, so John Balderas from Kansas City asks, would this be a good time to ask about legacy data? Yes, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. If you can ask it yourself, John. Go ahead, you're unmuted. Are you there? All right. So if you want to say something, John, go ahead. Oh no, we can't hear you. Sorry, folks. He's asking if we can hear him, and I'm saying no, we can't. Let's see. Well, if you want to just type it in, John, I can go ahead and answer it. The question has to do with legacy data. And he says, I am trying to import past year's revenue data into Balancing Act, but I'm unsure how to do that. By which past years is it? Is it information? Is it past budget information? Is it past information regarding input from Balancing Act that you've received from Balancing Act? Trying to figure what, or I know you and I have had a little bit of conversation about trying to add like your Socrata visualizations. I'm wondering if that's what you're referring to. Go ahead and type it in if you want, and I'd be glad to try to answer, but I'm not quite sure what you mean right now. I wish we could get your audio to work, all right? Okay. Well, Jaron, you and I can talk on the phone afterwards because it looks like we're not able to hear you. So I'm sorry about that, but we can talk later this afternoon if you want. Any other questions? Okay. So moving forward, this was intended to be about 30 or 40 minutes, not too big of a lift. So we're on time with that. Getting ready for next week. So please create a trial account, and I'm going to show you where to go to do that. So you just go to our home site or our home page, and you scroll all the way down to the bottom, and go to sign up, and just put in your information and sign up. And once you've done that, let me know, and I'm going to actually enable your account with all the features so that you'll be able to try out everything. So shoot me an email once you've created your account, and we'll get you all set up. Going back to the PowerPoint, try to build your basic simulation. So I know we've got some pro users on the call here that have already created theirs, and even their cities have done it. Jaron is from Kansas City, is a new person that's been assigned to do this. So he's both got something to build on, but also some new things to learn about. But feel free to play around with various features. Give me a call if you, or shoot me an email if you have any questions. Also, in just a sec, there's going to be a snap poll that's going to ask you how the simulation went, and if there's any additional questions you had or ideas that you had, and there'll also be a recording. And I'm seeing that there is another question from Jennifer Varney from Sterling Heights, and she asks, is there a way to not use subcategories? I find that I have categories that only have one subcategory. That seems redundant, and there's not, and I know what you're talking about. Like sometimes you might have on the revenue side, you might have a category that says sales tax, and then your subcategory is sales tax. And just the architecture of the system is that we do require subcategories, and I apologize for that, but there might be a way to combine that in such a way just by using some different type of language. And once again, Jennifer, I'd be glad to sort of troubleshoot that with you if you want to talk on the phone. We've run across this a couple times, but the architecture of the system is that we have to have a category, a subcategory, and an amount. I apologize for that. Anything else? Any other questions? All right. Well, once again, give a call. If you need anything, please take out your trial account, and we will be reconvening here in exactly 1 week. And if you want to show off what you're doing, or you have any questions or want to have some peer feedback, we'll make some time for that. So once again, everyone, thank you so much, and we will look forward to talking to you soon. Okay, thanks. Bye.